Namaskar. A warm welcome to World News, an Indian perspective on All India Radio. This is Abhineet Shukla and with me is Pallavi Manchanda, bringing glimpses of the major developments of the day from across the globe. Over the next half an hour, we shall bring you the latest from the world of politics, economy, sports, entertainment and more. The headlines. Prime Minister Narendra Modi says India is moving ahead with intention of investing over 100 lakh crore rupees on modern infrastructure. India-Russia joint venture set to give a big boost to self-reliance in defence, manufacturing of over 5 lakh AK-203 rifles to start at Amethi in Uttar Pradesh. Russian President Vladimir Putin to visit New Delhi on Monday for the 21st India-Russia Annual Summit with Prime Minister Narendra Modi. French President Emmanuel Macron says France is working with other European nations to open a joint diplomatic mission in Afghanistan. In cricket, India lead by 332 runs in their second innings against New Zealand at Stumps on day 2 of second and final test in Mumbai. And ace shuttler PV Sindhu storms into women's singles final of BWF World Tour Finals in Bali. As India marches towards administering 150 crore vaccine doses against COVID-19, news about the fresh corona variants is also causing concern. In this situation, we appeal to our listeners to get fully vaccinated at the earliest and also help others get vaccinated. Please follow these 3 simple steps. Wear a face mask, maintain 2 gaz ki duri for social distancing, and focus on hand and face hygiene. For any COVID-related information and guidance, contact the national helpline numbers 011 2397 8046 and 1075. And now the news. Prime Minister Narendra Modi inaugurated and laid the foundation stone of multiple projects worth around 18,000 crore rupees at Dehradun in Uttarakhand. Speaking on the occasion on Saturday, the Prime Minister said, in the last 5 years, the centre has approved schemes worth more than 1 lakh crore rupees for the development of Uttarakhand.
इस क्षेत्र का विकास यहाँ को भव्य स्वरूप देना डबल इंजन की सरकार की सर्वोच्च प्राथमिकता है। इसी भावना से सिर्फ बीते 5 वर्षों में उत्तराखंड के विकास के लिए केंद्र सरकार ने 1 लाख करोड़ रुपए से अधिक परियोजनाएं स्वीकृत की हैं।
The Prime Minister said India is moving ahead with the intention of investing more than 100 lakh crore rupees on modern infrastructure. Mr. Modi said India's policy today is of Gati Shakti, to work twice or thrice as fast. He said the reconstruction of Kedar Dham in the state has not only increased the number of devotees coming for darshan, but has also provided many opportunities for employment and self-employment to the local people. The 7 projects inaugurated by the Prime Minister consist of initiatives focusing on making travel safer by tackling the problem of chronic landslides in the region. He also inaugurated the 120 megawatt Vyasi hydroelectric project built over Yamuna River at the cost of over 1,700 crore rupees, along with the Himalayan Culture Centre in Dehradun. The 11 projects for which foundation was laid on Saturday include the Delhi-Dehradun Economic Corridor, which will be built at a cost of around 8,300 crore rupees. It will be significantly reduce the travel time from Delhi to Dehradun from 6 hours to around 2.5 hours. It will have Asia's largest wildlife elevated corridor of 12 kilometers for unrestricted wildlife movement. It will also boost interstate tourism. Defence Minister Rajnath Singh has said that the government aims to achieve the defence export target of 35,000 crore rupees by 2024-25. The Defence Minister was speaking at the Society of Indian Defence Manufacturers on Saturday. He said, promoting Indian exports is the topmost priority of the government. He said India should become a net exporter instead of a net importer. Mr. Singh said, Defence Ministry has approved a central sector scheme for IDEX with a 500 crore rupees budget for the next 5 years from 2021-22 to 2025-26, which will provide financial aid to 300 startups, MSMEs and individual innovators and 20 partner incubators.
Russian President Vladimir Putin will pay an official visit to New Delhi on Monday for the 21st India-Russia Annual Summit with Prime Minister Narendra Modi. The leaders will review the state and prospects of bilateral relations and discuss ways to further strengthen the strategic partnership between the two countries. The summit will be an opportunity to exchange views on regional, multilateral and international issues of mutual interest. Both leaders will also hold one-on-one talks. Our correspondent reports there will be intensive engagement during the day, culminating with the India-Russia Annual Summit. Defense Minister Rajnath Singh and his Russian counterpart Sergei Shoigu will co-chair the Intergovernmental Commission on Military Technical Cooperation on Monday morning. Ahead of Mr. Putin's visit, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov will arrive in India on Sunday night. During his visit, he will meet External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar and take part in the 2+2 multi-ministerial dialogue between India and Russia. In the run-up to Russian President Vladimir Putin's upcoming visit to India, All India Radio News has started a series, India-Russia Connect. Today we bring for our listeners how an India-Russia joint venture is all set to give a big boost to self-reliance in defense. Under the project, over 5 lakh AK-203 rifles will be produced at Amethi in Uttar Pradesh, giving a boost to Make in India and paving the way for Uttar Pradesh to become a defense manufacturing hub of India. A report.
India-Russia partnership in various sectors, especially defense, has grown manifold over the years. In yet another example, the two countries have joined hands to produce over 5 lakh AK-203 assault rifles at Korwa at Amethi in Uttar Pradesh. The project will be implemented by a special purpose joint venture called Indo-Russian Rifles Private Limited. It has been created with the Advanced Weapons and Equipment India Limited and Munitions India Limited from the Indian side and Rosovoron Export and Concern Kalashnikov of Russia. AK-203 assault rifles enhance the combat potential of soldiers to meet the operational challenges and the increasing effectiveness of counter-insurgency and counter-terrorism operations. The project will provide business opportunities to various MSMEs and other defense industries for supply of raw material and components. It will in turn lead to generation of new employment opportunities. The project marks a significant stride towards making Uttar Pradesh a key contributor in the defense manufacturing prowess of India. Sobhagya, World News.
In today's Hotspot section, we bring you a discussion on India-Russia Connect. The participants are P.S. Raghavan, former ambassador, and Nilova Roy Chaudhary, a journalist.
Russian President Vladimir Putin arrives in Delhi for the 21st Annual Bilateral India-Russia Summit with Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Monday, December the 6th. This in-person summit is being held after 2 years after they last met bilaterally in Vladivostok in September 2019. The summit could not be held in India last year because of the global COVID pandemic. President Putin's visit will provide further impetus to the India-Russia Special and Privileged Strategic Partnership. A number of important agreements related to defense exchanges are likely to be signed during the visit, and the S-400 Triumph missile defense system is also likely to feature. The summit will also allow the two leaders to review not only their bilateral relations, but also discuss the state of the region. Security issues are likely to be discussed in some detail. Of these, of particular interest will be their talks on the situation in Afghanistan after the Taliban takeover in August. Prime Minister Modi is also likely to get an overview of the just concluded Iran nuclear talks in Vienna. We are joined this evening by Ambassador P.S. Raghavan, who's been the chairman of the National Security Advisory Board and is an old and very well-versed in matters between India and Russia. Ambassador, how important is this particular summit in the context of bilateral relations and the geostrategic environment?
I think it's a very important visit for a number of reasons. One is that we took a year's gap in the annual summitry for reasons of COVID. However, it got interpreted in various ways in various quarters and gave rise to unfounded speculation. So it's very good that they are now in a position to correct these narratives and to discuss the strategic partnership in all its details. As you said, the discussions will have to look at both strictly bilateral cooperation, as well as the world around us, because one of the features of the India-Russia relationship from the time the strategic partnership started in the year 2000 is the fact that it has been impacted by global geopolitical flux at various stages. There are external impact which also affect the way India and Russia deal with each other. And so they will not only talk about the bilateral relationship like you said, defense, there would also be energy, there would also be economic cooperation that we want to particularly promote, but also about the situation around Afghanistan. And of course, I think Russia-China relations will figure, Russia-Pakistan relations will figure. The Russians would want to know about our initiatives in the Quad and the Malabar, this American legislation called CATSA. To figure, you talked about the S-400 in that context. That will also figure. So there's a pretty wide agenda there that they would cover.
Now, the Russian president's aide, Yuri Ushakov, has told TASS that as many as 10 agreements are likely to be signed. What areas are these particular agreements likely to be covering?
See, I cannot give you inside information because I'm not in government. But what I can, I think, make a reasonable guess as to what they would be. Because there has been talk about this. They said that they will talk about, in terms of defense, some kind of a long-term program of cooperation in defense, which will sort of lay out a roadmap of how we will take our defense cooperation forward in concept terms, in terms of how will we promote indigenization, how will we sort of arrange our interaction in defense. And that I could imagine that would be one of them. Also, our external affairs minister did say when he was in Moscow in July this year that this $1 billion line of credit that the Prime Minister announced in Vladivostok in 2019 as part of the Act Far East initiative. He had actually, the External Affairs Minister had said that, already some modalities had been worked out and we are looking at a couple of projects which would be essentially, I should imagine, investment projects for natural resources, hydrocarbons and so on in the Russian Far East. That certainly looks like it will be on the anvil. These one can definitely say. There may be other economic cooperation projects, which is very important because we've been wanting to really ramp up our economic cooperation. That is a weak pillar in our bilateral relationship. So these I can straight away off the top of my head see as possibilities of bilateral agreements that can be signed. Of course, the Russians are very fond of counting the number of agreements. I mean, this is a traditional characteristic. So I would not get into the numbers game. I don't know actually what else.
Well, this time is also the first time, just before the leaders meet for the summit, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and the Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu will also be in India. And for the first 2+2 external affairs and defense talks with their counterparts here, External Affairs Minister Jaishankar and Raksha Mantri Rajnath Singh. These will be the first bilateral talks in the 2+2 format, which we have with very few countries at the level of defense and foreign ministers. What does this ramping up, as it were, of the relationship indicate to you? I mean, how important is it to have this format also within the bilateral arrangement?
It's a very significant format. It's a very significant initiative that was taken. On one plane, of course, one can say that it will also counter this narrative that the India-Russia strategic partnership is running out of steam, as it were, since our more partnership is with the US and with the West and so on. This counters that in the sense that nobody disputes the fact that our relations with the US are very important and they cover a very wide canvas. The point is that also have a relationship with Russia, both for which has bilateral importance as well as importance in the region, which we talked about also. So what the 2+2 sets out to achieve is to actually, coordinate our foreign policy outlook and our strategic perspectives in the region around us and on the global canvas, which will also impact on India-Russia relations. Actually today, no strategic partnership is represents totally a congruence of interest. There will be a number of interests that will coincide. There will be other areas in which we will diverge in our perspective. The idea actually is to make sure that where we have convergence of interest, we pursue them in a focused manner, and where we have divergences of interest or perspectives, we are able to reconcile them as far as possible and work in a way that does not step on each other's toes. In other words, impact on the core interests of the other country. That is an exercise which a truly strategic partnership should carry out, and that I think is what the 2+2 is intended to do.
Now, India and Russia have always had traditionally a really close certainly security relationship. So why has there been all of these suggestions that the two countries have drifted apart somewhat? And, there have been these suggestions that keep coming up, it's either the United States or Russia. So why exactly has this sort of gained credence somewhat?
Well, rather paradoxically, part of the reason is that, we have this traditional, very close relationship. And therefore, if there is a sign that we are also developing relations with other countries, it somehow seems a dilution of relations with Russia. The fact of the matter is, as we go further and further away from the Cold War, you have geopolitical flux in the world, you have sort of matrix of interests crisscrossing each other, and therefore you do not have, as I said earlier, you cannot have a congruence of interest with any one country, which means basically the India-Russia relationship cannot have the exclusivity, if you like, of the past. It cannot have the same salience of the past, which does not mean that we do not have important strategic interests. We do, and we are pursuing them. But it does not mean that Russia is our sole partner.
Right.
So, you have these are all public narratives, some facile argument. If you say that Russia-China relations are increasing, it's like saying that, my best friend has run away with my enemy. That kind of imagery is not helpful. International relations today are far more nuanced. And that's basically the reason. Because if you look at it, actually in hardcore terms, if you look at the areas where we are doing business with each other, there are some very solid areas. In defense cooperation itself, if you see, no country transfers the level of technologies that Russia does. And people can keep talking about getting weapons from others. But if you see the last 5 years, 49% of our weapons and equipment have come from Russia. So these are all objective facts. Energy security. Look at what we are doing in energy. We are doing an enormous lot in energy. In terms of our biggest hydrocarbons investment is in Russia. Russia's highest foreign direct investment in India is in India, and it is in the hydrocarbon sphere. Nuclear power. LNG now, GAIL now has a 20-year contract for transport of LNG, and that comes from the Northern Sea route across the Pacific and Indian Ocean into India. So, if you look at just these objective facts, they will counter any perception that we do not have, that the relationship has weakened. We have diversified our relationship. We have diversified our military acquisition. That is as it should be in today's world, which does not, and that is, we still have an annual meeting with Russia. Very few, in fact, we probably have no other country with which we have continued this tradition of annual summits.
Indeed. Now, the point is also that, of course, the defense component is huge, and in the current circumstances, the energy cooperation component is also equally huge. And I believe the head of Rosneft is also accompanying President Putin this time. Given the rising prices and given all of the energy problems that Russia being part of OPEC also, do you think there's one of the things that will be talked about is Russia ramping up oil production to maybe ease prices globally?
Well, maybe that will be talked about, but that is not really a bilateral issue between India and Russia. That is part of a rather large debate. And Russia is actually not even a member of OPEC. It is a member of OPEC Plus. It has some influence on OPEC, but OPEC is effectively led by Saudi Arabia, and there are a number of undercurrents. There are political undercurrents, there are economic undercurrents, there are also differences within OPEC itself. That's not such an easy decision to take, and also there is a US-Russia dynamic that plays itself out on this. This huge controversy about gas prices and how Russia is using gas as a geopolitical weapon, that has become a big issue between Russia and the West, and that probably also ensures that Russia does not want to give an easy pass to the West on, and they're speculating here. But essentially, I don't think that India can really influence Russian behavior on producing more oil or ensuring that the oil prices go down.
Given the current circumstances, the differences also seem to the situation in Afghanistan. Russia has retained its embassy in Kabul. Does this help us in any way? How do Indian interests and Russian interests converge in Afghanistan at this point of time?
I did mention that, these external developments impact on India-Russia relations in many ways. Now, if you look at Afghanistan, how Russia got involved in Afghanistan before the Taliban left, it's part of the Russia-US standoff which has taken place across all geographies. If you go from the Baltic Sea right up to Afghanistan, and there is this whole Russian fear, real or imagined or whatever, that the West, that the US and its allies are seeking to destabilize Russia across its perimeter. So in Afghanistan, when the US troops were there, and particularly after 2014, Russia kept talking about an effort to push terrorists and radicals across the porous Central Asia border. Now, Russia claims that it started cultivating the Taliban as a deterrent against this. Then what happened was that President Trump made this decision to vacate Afghanistan. Now, you see, these two, US and Russia, from opposite sides of the spectrum, had the same objective. The US wanted to leave, Russia wanted to see them leave. And therefore they could cooperate, and they roped in China and Pakistan into this whole process of extended troika, etc., etc. That's how eventually the Taliban was brought to the negotiating table and signed this agreement with the US, and the US left, etc., etc., etc. But now that the Taliban have left, the fact that Russians have in Afghanistan is neither here nor there. I mean, if they feel that it is useful to get the Taliban to treat them better, so much the better for them. They have not actually recognized the Taliban government. That way they have been the rest of the world in saying that we will recognize if you have an inclusive government. But if you look at it, there was this reason for that. Now, if you look at what they're doing today, there may be some tactics that they're pursuing. But in long term, from strategic perspective, Russia's views and India's views are the same. Russia wants an Afghanistan as peace within itself. Russia does not want Afghanistan to export terrorism or Islamic fundamentalism or drugs. So actually from that perspective, our immediate tactics may be different, but in a long-term strategic perspective is the same, and that is why you saw that in fact, President Putin rang up Prime Minister Modi a few days after the Taliban took over. Then their national security advisor came to meet with our national security advisor. Our deputy NSA Pankaj Saran was in Moscow. Then again, their NSA came with the Central Asian countries to have consultations with our NSA Ajit Doval. So, there has been a lot of interaction and a sort of strategic fine-tuning of perspective.
So that, so these talks on Monday are going to be extremely fruitful, and lots probably will emerge from it in terms of firming up our respective positions. Thank you very much, indeed, Ambassador Raghavan. We've run right out of time.
This is All India Radio giving you the news. For quick news updates around the clock, follow us on Twitter @AIR News Alerts.
Welcome back to the World News. French President Emmanuel Macron has said that several European countries are working on opening up a joint diplomatic mission in Afghanistan that would enable their ambassadors to return to the country. A report.
Western countries have been struggling with how to engage with the Taliban after they took over Afghanistan in August, when United States-led forces were completing their pullout. Talking to reporters on Saturday in Doha before heading to Jeddah in Saudi Arabia, Mr. Macron said they are thinking of an organization between several European countries. He said it may be a common location in Afghanistan for several Europeans, which would allow ambassadors of European countries to be present. The United States and other Western countries shut their embassies and withdrew their diplomats as the Taliban seized Kabul. Later, the militants declared an interim government in Afghanistan whose top members are under US and UN sanctions. The United States, European countries and others are reluctant to formally recognize the Pashtun-dominated Taliban, accusing them of backtracking on pledges of political and ethnic inclusivity and to uphold the rights of women and minorities. Renu Kataria for World News, All India Radio.
India's Home Minister Amit Shah reviewed security situation on Indo-Pakistan border at Jaisalmer in Rajasthan. Mr. Shah reached Jaisalmer Saturday afternoon on a two-day visit to Rajasthan. He also interacted with the Border Security Force personnel at Rohtash border post. Addressing the gathering, the Home Minister said, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has made a very big decision that health cards be issued to Central Armed Police Forces, Jawans and their families. In the Kashmir Valley, security forces arrested an active terrorist in Budgam and recovered arms and ammunition from his possession. On a specific input regarding movement of terrorists in Pushkar area of Budgam, police, along with 62 Rashtriya Rifles and 79 Battalion CRPF, launched a joint cordon and search operation in the area. During the search operation, the joint team arrested an active terrorist linked with proscribed terror outfit Lashkar-e-Toiba or LET. He has been identified as Abdul Hamid Nath, resident of Petzanigam, Birwa in Budgam district. India's exports of agricultural and processed food products rose by more than 13% in terms of US dollars in the first 8 months of the current fiscal compared to the same period of the previous year. The export of products under the Agricultural and Processed Food Products Export Development Authority (AMBIT) increased from $11,671 million in April to November 2020-21 to $13,261 million in April to November 2021-22.
In cricket, India were leading by 332 runs in their second innings against New Zealand at stumps on day 2 of second and final test in Mumbai. The hosts, after coming to bat for the second time in a day, were at 69 for no loss at the end of the play, with opener Mayank Agarwal and Chiteshwar Pujara on the crease. Earlier, New Zealand were bundled out for 62 in their first innings. Ravichandran Ashwin took 4 wickets. India were all out for 325 in their first innings earlier in the day. Ajaz Patel took all 10 wickets for New Zealand. The 33-year-old spinner became the third cricketer in the history of Test cricket to achieve this feat after English pacer Jim Laker and Indian bowler Anil Kumble. The hosts had won the toss and opted to bat on the opening day. Mayank Agarwal's magnificent century was the highlight of the Indian innings. He went on to contribute 150 runs. In the BWF World Tour Finals in Bali, 2-time Olympic medalist PV Sindhu defeated Akane Yamaguchi in the semi-finals by 21-15, 15-21, 21-19 match on Saturday. PV Sindhu will now face South Korea's An Se-young in the summit clash on Sunday. This was the 21st meeting between Sindhu and Yamaguchi, and after this win, Sindhu leads the head-to-head record by 13-8. In the group phase, the Indian won 2 matches and lost 1. Her only loss came on Friday against Pornpavi Chochuwong. The Thai player defeated Sindhu in the last group match. India's Lakshya Sen lost to Olympic champion Danish Victor Axelsen by 21-13, 21-11. On Friday, Victor Axelsen and Tokyo Games silver medalist Tai Zu Ying were named the BWF Male and Female Player of the Year respectively in recognition of their stellar runs this season. In FIH Men's Hockey Junior World Cup being held at Bhubaneswar in Odisha is approaching the grand finale on Sunday when Argentina and Germany will lock horns in the summit clash. Hosts and defending champions India will fight it out for the bronze medal when they take on France on the same day. India has faced 1 defeat at the hands of France earlier in the tournament. Belgium will play the Netherlands in an all-European battle for 5th spot, while Malaysia and Spain will regroup to contest for the 7th spot.
Now let us take a look at the major developments around the world as reported in the foreign press. The Wall Street Journal writes, Bitcoin price tumbles after Wall Street sell-off. South China Morning Post reports, China puts on its own democracy forum in countdown to Biden's summit. Sputnik News writes, US intel accuses Russia of planning multi-front offensive against Ukraine as early as 2022. The Globe and Mail says, vaccinated air passengers should be ready for on-arrival testing and isolation, Health Minister says. The Sydney Morning Herald reports divide and rule, Myanmar junta weaponizing racial tensions. The Washington Post says Omicron possibly more infectious because it shares genetic code with common cold coronavirus, study says. The Guardian writes, Sage scientists seek balanced UK response to Omicron concerns. A quick look at the headlines once again. Prime Minister Narendra Modi says India is moving ahead with the intention of investing over 100 lakh crore rupees on modern infrastructure. India-Russia joint venture set to give a big boost to self-reliance in defence, manufacturing of over 5 lakh AK-203 rifles to start at Amethi in Uttar Pradesh. Russian President Vladimir Putin to visit New Delhi on Monday for the 21st India-Russia Annual Summit with Prime Minister Narendra Modi. French President Emmanuel Macron says France is working with other European nations to open a joint diplomatic mission in Afghanistan. In cricket, India lead by 332 runs in their second innings against New Zealand at stumps on day 2 of the second and final test in Mumbai. And ace shuttler PV Sindhu storms into women's singles final of BWF World Tour Finals in Bali. India is celebrating the 152nd birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi. Before we end, let us listen to his favorite bhajan Vaishnav Jan by artists from Ireland.
Vaishnav Jan tho tene khahiye je phir parayi jane re har dukhe upakare kare toye mahanabhimane re Vaishnava Janato Tene Kahiye Pida Parayi Janere
And with that, we end this bulletin. We will be back at the same time tomorrow with the next edition of World News.